Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahawah, Bahasham, Yahawashi, Bahasham, Harakakadash. I would also like to give a double honors unto the apostles and the elder bishops of Great Millstone who do well that have taught me this truth. And I would also like to say a sincere shalom unto the hopeful elect, unto the scattered elect, unto the brothers, the prophets, the men that are out there prophesying, laboring in this truth and in this doctrine. Unto you, I say shalom. Is a global food crisis already here? And it's a question because whether these people believe it or not, we are entering into a global food crisis. This is not going to be isolated to this country, to this country. It's going to be a global food crisis, a global shortage, a global scarcity of food. And food is the main necessity with outside of water that you need to live. Therefore, if there's a famine, if there's a scarcity of food, a lot of people are going to die from starvation. That's the reality, and this biblical, it's prophetic, it's prophecy. So we're not just talking out of our ass. Thus saith the scriptures. The scripture says this, and it's happening right before our eyes. All right, so you Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, and Israelites scattered amongst these heathen nations need to take heed to this warning because you can't stop it. You can go plant fields across Babylon, across all America, and water them, but you won't have enough water. Okay, but at the same time, the international bankers they don't want natural crops. They paid farmers to stop growing food. You have Bill Gates buy up all this. A few years ago, or maybe 4 or 5 years ago, bought up all this farmland in America. All right, pretty much Central America. All right, and so they want a famine. They want they're strategically planning a engineered famine. Therefore, the public will have to. They have no choice but to depend on them in this new world order system. So the famine is nothing more than a prophecy. One of the major prophecies. All right, not the super major. I won't say super major, but it's one of the prophecies that is written in the scriptures that is going to come to pass and it's going to hit hard in these last days that we're coming into. And I have an article right here. Actually, I'm gonna read some of the article. It won't let me. This article is from the financialtimes.com. So if I click on it, it's not gonna come up because you got to pay. And I'm not about to do that. But I do have the article. I have it written down, or I printed it out from another source. And so I'm going to read, this is the part of the title. It says, Hunger and even famine are foreseeable consequences of the war on Iran. And now the world must act to shield the poorest from effects that will continue long after the fighting stops. So you have to understand there's even when the Ukraine and Russian wars began, all right, that put a halt to a lot of the wheat production. And they say 2/3 of the wheat comes from I believe Ukraine. All right, they call it the bread basket. All right, so hey, that's one facet, and of course, nothing really gets produced and grown over here in the states. All right, and the things that do is it's not as much. A lot of stuff comes from China. A lot of produce comes from China. Okay, and so it's a lot of ways that your food can be shut down, can be shut off, whether you believe it or not. Okay. It says consequences of the war. Okay, let me start reading the articles. It's few 20th century transformations did more to remake the world than the Green Revolution. From the 1950s onward, high yielding crop varieties, synthetic fertilizers, chemical pesticides, and large scale irrigation drove a sharp increase in the output of staple crops such as wheat and rice. In its more celebratory accounts, this transformation pushed back the famine and helped support rapid population growth, much in Asia and Latin America. All right, India is one of the key centuries of the Green Revolution, more than doubled wheat production between the mid 1960s and 1970s. So this is giving a brief history of the production of the so-called Green Revolution that took place, but all that shit's in the past now, okay? Because Esau, All right, they want a famine. They want to engineer certain foods and build them in all foods pretty much and make them in a laboratory. All right. Back to the article. It says numerous critics have noted the Green Revolution also came with enormous ecological and social costs. But one of its less discussed consequences was the link it established between food production and fossil fuel industry across every stage of farming. Higher yields depended on a vast expansion of mechanization, pump irrigation, and above all synthetic fertilizer. And a lot of the fertilizer is scarce now. Okay, because of this war, people don't realize a lot of when this war hits full scale, a lot of resources are going to be pushed into this war. So the food you have here, or the food that would have been sold to American citizens, I'm just talking about here in the States, American citizens will be given to Israel and eventually given to the troops. All right, because you can't fight a war without feeding your troops. Even though a recent video came out to show that they just feeding the troops slop. Okay, and you're going to have a lot of American troops in the four different branches of military going to be AWOL because they know that this war is bullshit. Okay, and they're already floating the idea of a draft. They're going to do it. Okay. It says back to the article, before the 20th century, farmers across the global south relied on organic inputs such as manure and compost to maintain soil nutrients, the high yielding varieties of the Green Revolution. By contrast, could only deliver the promised output through large and repeated applications of industrial fertilizer, especially nitrogen-based products such as urea and ammonium nitrate. Since many of these fertilizers are delivered from natural gas, the Green Revolution meant the world's food production became even more closely tied to a constantly increasing supply of hydrocarbon inputs. Let me see. Doubts have been expressed about the sustainability of the fossil fuel based food system. So it's based on fossil fuels. Um, okay, like the oil and the oil that's refined that produces diesel and various other energy gas for vehicles. You have to ship a lot of this stuff over here in cargo ships, and when you get it to the docks, it has to be driven to the processing plants, and from there to the consumers, to the stores. All right, but the price of oil, the gas is increased, therefore the food is going to increase. All right, it says, but as oil and gas prices have risen steeply amid the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, and a significant part of a global fertilizer trade has been brought to a standstill, its potential vulnerabilities have been made clear. After only 7 weeks, food shortages, even famine, are now looking more likely for millions of people across vulnerable countries in Africa and Asia. All right, so eventually that's going to come here to America. Even though this country, all right, has abundance of food, they throw away food. The food they throw away in a year could feed a whole nation. Okay, but the wicked elite, they want these smaller countries, these African countries where they're already famished, they're on the borderline, they're already impoverished, but they're on the borderline of dying. Esau let them die. Okay, in Asia too, because they still have a depopulation agenda. Okay, and starving the people out through famine is one of those ways or right device that they're going to use to reduce the population. Okay, but when it hits here in Babylon, it's going to hit the hardest because these people here are gluttonous. They have to eat multiple night. They used to eat 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. These people eat four, 5, and 6 times a day. A snack here, a snack here. So when the famine hits, when hyperinflation hits, these people are not going to know how to react. Okay, they're gonna when they're gonna try to rush to the stores and get all this bullshit and cupcakes and Twinkies and shit like that instead of going to get things that will help sustain them, like nuts, okay, water, of course, herbal teas, things like that. Niggas ain't gonna go out there and get that stuff. They're gonna be going for the the sugar, heavy in sugar and sodium type foods. All right, which in the time of a famine, it's just gonna make you worse. All right, once you eat that bullshit, it's gonna make you more hungry because a lot of that stuff, if not the majority of it, has chemicals in it. All right, these foods are chemically based now. All right, they don't have the nutrients that your body needs to sustain for without eating for a long period of time. Okay, but the famine is near. All right, and a global famine. All right, you're not just it's not going to be just concentrated to one area or specific to one area. It's going to be a global famine. All right, but the devil wants this. All right, and the prophets have warned you, are warning you of these things that are to come. Let me play this real quick. This is like a little insert. Economist on Trump economy. I'm playing from the middle.
Dollars on just jet fuel because people weighed less. I mean, there was literally nothing you could do to stop the economy under the AI boom and all the rest. And now here we are. We're not just dealing with jet fuel price surges of 95%, but now we have outright shortages. So across Asia, there are halted flights. They have 3-day work weeks because they're trying to conserve fuel. That's moving over to the EU. In the United States, we are feeling that pain too. Gas prices, airplane prices are up $200 on flights, and some are just being canceled altogether. Food inflation is the next shoe to drop. Everything that
food inflation is the next shoe to drop. All right, she said inflation, not hyperinflation, but we're on our way. Okay, when you're gonna have to, people are gonna have to decide. Yeah, I got to go to work, but damn, I'm hungry. All right, do I put gas in my car or do I buy some food? Okay, and a lot of people are already going into their 401ks. Whether they're taking withdrawals or they're taking loans on their 401ks. A lot of people are maxing out their credit cards. Where that's another device that Esau uses to keep you in debt or to keep you a slave to the system. Okay, and people can't they don't have the spiritual eyes to see and understand what's really going on. They're just going about their business trying to, trying to figure it out. But at the same time, they're just digging themselves a bigger hole. All right. And Esau, he's going to come, he's going to help you out that hole, but it's going to come it's going to come in the form of that chip. Okay. That mark of the beast. All right. Hey, Esau may have a deal where they clear all your debt. Just take that chip. Okay. It says these are the average gas prices. Okay. Let me see what else you got to say.
Diesel or gasoline to move, whether it's everything you buy at Walmart or your groceries from the store, all that is still to come and to get more expensive. So the long-term costs of this war, especially when you're judging it by the economy that the president was handed, is really just depressing to think about the growth that we could be under. And instead, we're dealing with rising inflation again. The Fed can't cut interest rates. It's a bummer.
So
now
hey, the economy obviously has a lot to do with the food. All right, and with the economy is booming, of course things are going to be reasonable to buy. You can stock up on certain things, but when it's not, all right, when you see the dollar, the petrodollar is steadily declining. All right, because these major countries are beginning to are finding ways to go around the petrodollar to purchase oil. All right, that brings a weaker and weaker dollar, and eventually it's not gonna be worth shit. All right, you better stock up on silver and gold as much as you can. Okay, but the prices, when those prices begin to really rise, it won't be obtainable. Okay, but these prophecies, these were all prophesied about global famine. All right, about a shortage of food, and like I said, there's going to be a shortage of food because Esau has warehouses with food in them. Okay, but Esau, this devil, he wants to have that ultimate control where he can ration the food out and give you this much or that much. And at the same time, that food rationing is going to go along with their New World Order system where they surveil everything that you consume, everything you eat, everything you buy. Oh, you bought too much meat this week, or you bought too much of this week. You need more of this. They're gonna use these AI bots and these various different methods of AI to basically control your life. All right, that's what Esau wants. That's his ultimate goal, is to have ultimate control of your life. Everyone in this inhabited world, and basically control you by cutting off your money, adding money, deducting money from your account, or your account, your chip. Okay, but like I said, these were all prophesied, and the end result of these prophetic events is going to be a civil war. All right, it's going to be what is it? The love of many shall wax cold. All right, neighbors fighting against neighbors, friends are fighting against friends. All right, it's going to bring a greater turmoil, a faster turmoil to Babylon, to America. All right, so let me start with Matthew. Let me see, Matthew 24 and 7. I started 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. All right, so we not always, but this is we're in a time of war. Okay, where you've seen that Ukraine and Iran, not Ukraine and Russian war. It's been going on for a while. All right, and we haven't been getting the reports as we once did. When it was at the beginning stages, but they still have conflict. That's still an ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And now we have Iran versus United States and the state of Israel. All right, and that's an ongoing conflict that's not going to die down with a ceasefire or anything. Okay, so these small wars are going to turn into greater wars, larger scale wars. Which is going to bring World War III. All right, and when World War III is at its full scale, or even at the beginning stages, that's when you're going to see a lot of the hyperinflation really kick off. All right, because just like these various countries, as it says in Joel 3, and I believe it's 7 or 8. It says, oh no, excuse me, verse 10, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. So just like these other nations are putting all their resources into war, America's going to do the same thing. And food is one of those things that they're going to have to, ration on to the people, because they're not going to have it. And at the same time, they got to feed those troops. Okay, hell, it may be an incentive to go to war, to sign up for the war, just because you get fed. All right, you got to understand how this devil works. This devil, they got enough food and enough money to feed the world and end world hunger, but they're covetous. They have a covetous spirit on them, where it's just it's like a nigga spirit, all right, where they want to they want to ration it out. You just won't, you just can't have fruit trees and things that are natural. No, Esau wants to have everything under his control, where you have to go to him for the one of all things. All right. Damn. Yeah. You know what? I'll go here. Because famine is not something that's new to the nation of Israel, to our people, because we dealt with famines in the ancient world, where hell, man, shit got bad. Shit got real bad. Where damn, what was it? I'm gonna get that scripture. It says, um, where people mortgage their properties. Let me look it up real quick. But it's going to get to that point just to eat. All right. I don't know what it was. I know the word. Am I spelling that right? Oh, Slovakia. It's Dearth. And dearth is another word for famine. It is here it is, Nehemiah 5:3. I'll start at 1. And another thing that's going to happen because of this global food shortage, it's going to cannibalism is going to come back. All right, where people's stomachs they're going to be growling. You know, they ain't ate in 3 days. They had last time they had some water was 6 days ago, and they got little kids. They got an old grandma. Hey, like you see in those cartoons where they be looking at they be hungry and they be the other person. They be looking at the other person and they be looking like a steak and shit. That's gonna happen for real. All right. It says Nehemiah 5:1, and there was a great cry in the city, and the people and their wives against their brethren the Jews, for there where they said, we, our sons and our daughters are many, therefore we take up corn for them that we may eat and live. Some also there some also there were that said, we have mortgaged our lands, vineyards, and houses that we might buy corn because of the dearth, because of the famine. Okay? The lack of food, the scarcity of food. They mortgaged their vineyards, their land, their homes, just so they could buy food. That's how much shit was costing. It was a form of hyperinflation. Okay? And they needed to survive. That's going to happen in these days, where people are going to sell they sell valuable things. All right, and the only thing really going to have any value in that time is silver. All right, gold, of course, precious metal. Hey, you're gonna have niggas out there. They may sell their woman. All right, barter their woman for a piece of bread, for something to eat. All right, it's going to get really cutthroat out here when people don't got no food. Because like I said, that's the second main necessity you need to live. All right, the water is the first one, and food and eat. You got to understand, this devil Esau. They know that. They know that food is one of the main necessities. They've done that in the past in the besiegement of 70 A.D. They made. Let me see, what is that scripture? I think it's Luke. But let me get this real quick. This is Jeremiah 14:1. And the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah concerning the dearth. Dearth. What's the word? Batsarat, I believe. Let me see. Basarath. Dearth, drought, destitution. Um, feminine, intensive, dearth, drought. All right, so they had a drought of water. All right, I believe there's a drought, a shortage of water in Colorado. All right, currently right now. All right, it says, let me see. Judas mourneth at the gates thereof, they languish, they are blackened to the ground, they cry, and the cry of Jerusalem is gone up. All right, they were dealing with famine, they were dealing with a drought. All right, um, and this was during the time of the Babylonians. Let me look up this one scripture real quick. It's in Luke 19. Luke 19 and verse. Let's see. I started at 41. And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the thing which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee that thine enemy shall cast a trench about thee and compass thee round and keep thee in on every side. So this was during the besiegement of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. They made a trench around Jerusalem where nothing could come in and nothing come out. No food, no supplies, nothing. Let me get this word. Trench. That's what they're going to do. They're going to cut off cities, or eventually. All right. They're going to blame it on different organizations. Esau loves to throw the blame around when they're the ones doing it, when they're the ones orchestrating the famine. Trench. Crocs. Carrots, a pale steak. Let's see, sharpened point. No, it was something else. But I think, let me see. A palisade, a rampant, a military mound. This is what I was looking for circumvention in a siege. So that's when 70 AD, in 70 AD, when the Jerusalem was sieged in 70 AD, they made a trench around Jerusalem where nothing could come in and nothing could come out. So in these modern days, they're going to do the same thing. All right, where it may not be a trench, but they're going to have cities blocked off. They're going to have curfews. They're going to have your national guards at your local grocery stores because people are going in there and stealing shit, or niggas is just going to flip out and bug out, man. All right, that's why they're going to have to have military at your grocery stores, and eventually your grocery stores are going to be scarce. Where you may have, say in your city you live in, you may have 30 grocery stores. That 30 is going to turn into 2 grocery stores, and eventually 1. Okay, where everyone got to go to that one grocery store. What do they call them? Something deserts. I can't think of the name. But hey, it's this is reality. These things are happening. This is not a this is not, we just talking crazy. No, this shit is happening. All right, and it's not going to go away. Trump ain't going to make shit better. He's having he can't deal with Iran. All right, so he's not going to make nothing better. He's just going to keep talking out the side of his neck. All right, until that time comes. All right, until he's really knee deep. All right, in this war, in the prophecy. All right, let me go to Second Ezra's 15, and I'm going to go to verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. And there shall be sedition among men, invading one another, and they shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So they're going to be invading one another, meaning invading their homes. Okay, it's going to be fighting because of the conditions. All right, not just, of course, the food is one of the main ones. The famine, drought. Okay, they all go hand in hand. All right, we know it's all coming from Yahawashi, but Esau is also engineering the famine. Therefore, people are going to be on edge. Motherfucker ain't ate 4 or 5 days, 6 days a week. They not tripping on who they knock off, or who to get some food, to get anything. People are just going to flip out, because at the end of the day, they're going to ask themselves, what do they got to lose? All right. It says there should be sedition among men. People will not regard it, because whether it's Trump or whether it's another president, they're going to come with some type of talk to people to be civil and peaceful, and people ain't trying to hear that shit. They done lost their job, they done lost their family, they hungry. Okay, they especially Esau, they really gonna bug out. All right, because this is their America, and they're gonna be brought to a lower position, and that they're not used to, that they feel that they shouldn't have to go through, because they're American, they pay their taxes, and they're gonna be brought to a low level too. All right, a lot of these Edomites, they're gonna go through the famine too. Okay, even though a lot of them may have, the resources, more resources than Jake, but hey, at the end of the day, they're gonna be in the same soup kitchen lines if you got one, if they got one, or you got a lot of Edomites in those food bank lines already. Okay, so shit is getting worse. It's not getting better. All right. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. This is the example of 70 A.D. No one could come in and out of Jerusalem. The military had it blocked off. Okay, and the same thing is going to happen here in Babylon. All right, the military is going to block the major highways off, where you can't go inside this city, and people can't leave the city, and people can't go in the city. All right, if you're looking for food, you can't go into that city. All right, unless you got a government pass or something, or some type of a certification or papers to get through. But this ain't the movies. Okay, this is real life, and Once these troops is out here in these streets and blocking shit off, they not about to play. Okay, this, like I said, this ain't the movies where they just let them through. Nah. Um, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but destroy. This is the point. Destroy their house with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. The lack of bread. Let a nigga miss hell 3 meals. Just don't eat today. Man, Jake will bug out. Jake will flip out. All right, Jake don't know how to fast. Jake doesn't know how to ration food because mainly our people, not just the so-called Negroes, all the tribes, and mainly the ones living here in Babylon, Central and South America. Hey, they know how to ration, the majority of them and portion their food off and plan. Niggas here in Babylon, all 12 tribes, they don't know. Okay, that's why they're going to be the biggest ones bugging out, right along with these Edomites. Okay, because of the lack of bread. All right. Let's go from there to the book of Revelation 6, speaking of the famine. Famine, sixth seal. What is it? Is it sixth seal? Third seal, excuse me. Verse 5. And we have opened the third seal. I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny." A penny is equivalent to a day's work in the ancient world. So a measure of wheat. And 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Let's see this in the NLT and see what it says. NIV. Then I heard a sound with a voice among the 4 living creatures, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wage, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wage. So just a whole day's wage. All right. So wherever you work at, whatever you make for that day, whether it's $100, $200, $300. Some people got decent jobs, maybe make $500 a day. Okay, your $500 will only get you maybe one meal, half a meal. Okay, when this hyperinflation really kicks off, they already, I believe Wendy's is going to have some digital menu for dynamic, what is that shit called? Dynamic pricing, I believe. I'm not sure that's the proper term. Where hey, if they could change the price on some shit, you go in there looking to get a burger or something, and shit be $5. You sit down and eat your burger. Oh, I might want to get another one. By the time you go up there and get another one, the shit could be $10. Okay, and that he did that in the Weimar Republic, back in Germany in the that was before World War II. I believe in the 20s. All right, in Germany, where they say people sit down for a steak, and the steak was this much. By the time it was time to pay, the steak that they purchased or they ate might have went up 20-50%. Okay, but that's where we at in this. Okay, yeah, and it's nowhere around it. You came back out. All right, because you can't move out. I'm gonna move out of America. The curses are going to follow us. All right. um. So let me go back to the Apocrypha, um, chapter 6, and I'm going to go to verse 22. So, excuse me. Verse 22, and suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, and the 4 storehouses shall suddenly be found empty. What are these storehouses full of? Food. People ain't going, in that day, niggas ain't not trying to go and see if they can get some Jordans or or some nigga shit. See if they can go get a rollie or some chain or none of that. Niggas ain't worried about that. Niggas is gonna be worried about food. See if hey, let's go sit down in this store and see if they got anything left. All right, let's go to this 7-Eleven and see if they got anything left or wherever. All right, wherever your local grocery store, your local corner market. All right, but those full storehouses are going to be found empty, where they ain't going to have no food, not even a cracker in that place. All right, and the trumpet shall give a sound, which when every man heareth, they shall be suddenly afraid. All right. In the ancient world, you had the trumpet was blown by the watchman. Okay, and when a certain sound, whether it be a sound for a feast day, a sound for the Sabbath, it could be a certain sound played by the trumpet for an enemy coming in. But when they heard that sound, which said when the trumpet shall give a sound, which when every man heareth, they shall be suddenly afraid. And hey, that sound in these days can come in many forms. Where Lord willing, is that chariot that's gonna come from Yahawashi and the angels, where people, men gonna hear that the trumpet from that chariot and gonna be afraid. Okay, but when it's a certain sound, it's a certain sound from the trumpet blowing blown. And hey, these words that the prophets are speaking, you Israelites, you men, okay, you should tremble. Okay, you should tremble at the words of the prophets. You should tremble at the words of Yahawah Yahawashi spoken by the prophets. All right, and you should tremble. You should fear and get right with the Lord. So when the time comes, when the famine comes, when the food scarcity, the drought really comes, you won't be out there like you won't be out there like the rest of these people. All right, hoping and wishing that Trump could make it better, and if I could just get this chip, I might be able to get some food. All right, niggas is gonna be looking for any and every way out of the misery and the agony and the pain that they're gonna partake in because of because of the return of Yahawashi to claim his what's rightfully his, okay, and take down these heathen. All right, famines and plagues must come. All right, because it's at the end of the day, because this place is wicked as hell, man. All right, this place needs plagues on top of plagues. That's how wicked this place is. All right, and yeah, we live here and we got to go through the plagues. Also, we just hope that the Heavenly Father has mercy upon us and accepts our prophesying and laboring as an acceptable sacrifice. All right, verse 24. And at that time, friends shall fight one against another like enemies, and the earth shall stand in fear with those that dwell therein. The springs of the fountain shall stand still, and in 3 hours they shall not run. It says, friends fight against. Excuse me. At that time shall friends fight one against another like enemies. Why are they fighting? What would make you fight your friend? All right. And you think about it, it could be certain situations or whatever, but you're gonna be fighting. They're gonna be fighting your friend for food, okay? For what maybe some medicine for a child or something, okay? Some type of supply. You ain't gonna be fighting nobody over hey, you could over no bullshit. You may fight somebody over a blanket, or depending on what time what the time of the year shit hit the fan. Okay, but you're gonna be fighting your neighbor for survival. Okay, so you can survive, and you don't care if they can survive. All right, or if they will survive. All right, it's gonna be everyone for themselves out here. All right, and it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be worse here. Worse, the worst judgment is coming here to Babylon. The worst of the worst plagues are coming here to Babylon, America. All right, while the rest of the world, they're gonna receive the plagues, they're gonna catch their hell, but it's not gonna be nothing compared to the hell that Jacob's going to catch here in Babylon. Hey, because it's Jacob's trouble. All right, yeah, we know Edomites are going to catch it, all these rest of these heathen nations, but it's Jacob's trouble. All right, therefore, Jacob has to, isn't going to endure the majority of the suffering when this great time comes. All right, so Lord willing, this lesson was edifying of the hopeful elect, and I would like to give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahawah Bahasham Yahawashi. Bahasham Harakapadash. Shalom.